Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Here is another iconic aircraft from World War I, the Fokker Dr1. The kit is from Eduard in 1:48 scale. This is a Profit Pack version. The box contains grey plastic sprues, a PE sheet, a masking sheet and decals for 6 marking options. According to Scalemates, Eduard released the Fokker Dr1 for the first time in 2008 as part of a limited edition dual combo with the Albatros D5. The kit that I built is just a rebox of the original release. Any of the releases since 2008 are the same, so if you want to build one, don't hesitate to pick any of them. The mold is nice, just a little bit of flash on the parts, easy to clean them. There is a lovely PE sheet for the kit, actually 2 for mine, thank you Eduard, and a film for the windshield. Unfortunately, there are ugly ejection pin marks inside the fuselage, and some of them are visible, so I fill them with putty and sanding them back to create a smooth surface for the paint. I used Mr. Hobby's Mr. White Putty R for filler and a fiberglass sanding pen. I had to modify the back wall of the cockpit behind the pilot's seat, because I plan to install the control cables. Under the seat there is an opening for the cables. It's absolutely not visible, but it was fun to make it. And also this opening made the installation of the cables easier. But I explain it later. I drilled 3 holes with a PCB 1mm drill bit, and then with my cheap mini drill and a file I formed the opening to the desired shape. After the preparation, I primed the inside of the fuselage to create a solid base for the paint job. For this base color I used Tamiya Deck10. This painting imitates the tone of the canvas really nicely on the sides and the back. There is a triangle-shaped wooden section on the sides. The easiest way to paint wood texture is using oil paints. But first, a matching base tone is necessary to achieve a nice wooden texture. This time I used Tamiya wooden Deck10. I carefully masked the area and painted a couple of light layers of wooden Deck10. I also used the same paint on the cockpit floor. After the paint had dried, I applied the oil paint. I used 502 Eptylum Dark Rust and ochre paint for the floor. Ochre first, then a touch of dark rust to emphasize the grains on it. For the side panels I used raw umber. Eduard provides decals for the wood areas, but I believe this easy and simple technique gives a better solution. What do you think? The carburetor's intake pipes on the sides of the fuselage were too thick, so I gradually drilled them with PCB drills from 0.8 to 1 mm. They look much better in this way, but maybe later I will replace them with real tubes. I painted the tube frame inside the cockpit to RLM02 and I used the same color for the seat frame and the control column. I used a detail brush on the back wall frame to paint the tubes. The pilot seat was originally covered by leather, so I imitate that, a combination of acrylic and oil paints. For the base color I used Tamiya Red Brown. This paint is perfect starting tone for me, so I painted a couple of light layers on it. Then I used a mixture of dark rust and red oil to create some interesting tone variations on the surface. In the next step I added a bit of wear and tear to the leather. I used a piece of sponge to chip Tamiya buff to the leather. I concentrated on the areas where abrasion most likely appears, mainly on the edges. Following this step I blended the edges with ochre oil. The next piece was the seat cushion. This time I used a darker brown from Tamiya to make a tone variation. After the paint had dried, I used the good old dry brush technique. Tamiya Desert Yellow was just perfect for this job. For the final step, I washed the surface with highly thin raw umber oil. This dark oil blended all the layers and highlighted, or in this case low-lighted, the corners. In the end, I have a really nice variation of brown tones, which I covered with the seat belts and was barely visible. Because the seat was made of sheet aluminum, I painted the back of the seat silver. The pure silver was quite dull, so I applied a touch of black oil to it, but it was really just a touch to imitate patina on it. For the ammunition box and the oil tank I used the same silver base color from Mr. Color and diluted back oil to give them some patina. These boxes are absolutely not visible at the end, but the fact that I made them makes me happy. Now let's finish the back wall. According to the picture I found, around the opening under the seat there was some wood frame. I'm not 100% certain about it, but I just painted it with Vallejo new wood. Anyway, it will completely hide under the seat, so it doesn't really matter. I used the dry brush technique again to emphasize the stitching around. Vallejo's old wood was a perfect color. After that I fixed the frame with RLM02 and applied a bit of weathering to create shades at the corners. There is a lovely little leather bag on the sidewall. Basically, I used the same paints and techniques to paint it that I used on the leather seat. Red-brown base and red leather from Vallejo to highlight the edges. The clip in the middle was silver. To deepen the shadows, I used black oil. Now let's marry the seat with the back wall. I use Tamiya white-cap cement. It dries slower than the green one, so we have more time to adjust the parts to the correct position. The next step was the seat belts. Nice pre-painted seat belts on the PE sheet. I wanted to use a fabric seat belt, but I didn't have a set, so I used the PE ones. Well, there is nothing wrong with the PE belts, but they are a bit stiff. It's not easy to achieve a realistic look, a natural fall on them. No matter how I try, they look a bit artificial to me. I cut the straps off the frame with a sharp hobby knife and then clean off the excess with the fine diamond file. The stiff metal can be softened by heating it over a flame, but in this case the pre-paint will be lost. I didn't want to bother with painting it, so I just bent the straps to the right shape and glued them in place with superglue. I think the result is acceptable, but next time I want to use a fabric one to create a more realistic look. At the end I used various brown and black oil paints for weathering. I concentrated in the corners to create more depth in the look. Inside the cockpit there are bracing wires between the fuselage frame. In 1/48 scale it's just too small to build it up properly, so I just stretched the rigging wire between the corners. There should be turnbuckles at the ends. Although I found resin turnbuckles in this scale, I felt it was a bit overscaled and too big. Unfortunately, I didn't find smaller pieces, so I just put a touch of superglue and stretched Ushifan der Rosten rigging wire between the corners. There was only one tricky part in this step when the frame was already glued into the fuselage, and one wire had to be glued from the frame corner to the fuselage. Other than that, it was nice and easy. Now don't make the same mistake that I did. Don't glue the little bag on. Wait until the seat is positioned in its place, but not just one side, both sides. Even though it looked good during the dry fit, I had problems when I placed the back wall between the two fuselage halves. So I took the little bag off and basically it fixed my problem. I painted the magneto switch silver and cut a piece of 0.1 mm wire for the cabling. On the right side on the floor in front of the seat there was a compass. We have two options, a PE compass or a nice decal one. I found the decal to look better in this case. There is also a PE frame around the compass, but it didn't fit properly, so I just kept it and didn't use it. I glued the floor and the back wall into the starboard side, and now it was time to glue the little bag in place. It looks much better like this. I held the two fuselage parts together with masking tape and glued the structural column for the rudder pedal, the ammo box and the oil tank. Again, I just glued only into the right side. There is a small information plate on the back of the ammunition box. A lovely PE part is included. All we have to do is just apply it. However, first I had to clean and paint it. Yes, paint it. The edges of the PE part are not painted, only the face. For cleaning I used a diamond file from Tamiya, but any fine file or sanding sponge would do the job. Then I used white acrylic from Vallejo. I applied a drop of JS superglue and just placed the plate onto the ammunition box. I glued a 2x2mm styrene block at the inside back of the fuselage, again into the right side. This block had two purposes. One, to reinforce the fuselage, and the main reason behind it was to hold the control cables in place, which I wanted to install. For the control cables I used 0.1mm silver rod. This size seems just right because 0.1mm in 1/48 scale is 4.8mm, which is reasonable for a control cable. I started with the rudder cables. I bent a hook on the end of the cable and fixed it at the rudder, then repeated it on the other rudder. With superglue I fixed the cables on the added block, of course in a parallel set position. As you might have realized, the control column is still missing. Yes, you are right, I didn't glue it in place to keep more space for installation of the cables. The aileron cables are crossing wires. First I installed the right side and then the left side. The last cable was the elevator control cable, but before that I glued the ammunition box and the oil tank on the top front and top back sides of the structural column. The next step was the control column. As far as I know, the Dr1 had a very special, unusual control column. The left side of the column, the left horn, was the throttle control, so the pilot could hold both hands on the column during flying, especially during a dogfight. According to the pilot's reports, the Fokker Dr1 was quite an unstable aircraft, meaning the pilot had to fly it and control it all the time. It was pretty handy that the pilot could operate the throttle while flying the aircraft with both hands. I painted the handle Vallejo New Wood and the gun triggers black. I also glued a 0.1mm copper wire to the machine gun's operation wire, and then I glued the column in place in a pushed and off position. Finally, I could install the last control cable, the elevator control cable. I didn't paint the cables, I liked the way they shined and stood out from the cockpit floor. One of the last steps of the cockpit build was the actual throttle and mixture control on the left side. A beautiful PE part is in the kit, but I modified it a bit to make it more realistic. I cut off the push-pull rod and replaced it with a 0.3mm nickel tube. Now it's not as flat as it was, and the throttle and mixture push-pull rods are more pronounced. I added a drop of superglue to the throttle handle to give it a bit more dimension. Finally, I glued it on the fuselage frame with a drop of superglue. And here is the last step of the cockpit build. I made the magneto switch from a leftover PE part. I carefully shaped it with a diamond file and glued it in place with superglue. I recommend using good quality tweezers for this delicate operation. And that's all for now. In the upcoming video I will show the rest of the build and tell you a little bit of the history of this fascinating flying machine. So stay tuned, please subscribe with a little bell if you haven't done so yet, and also give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. I hope you had a good time, keep modeling, and I see you in the next episode.